Hello and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. It is Friday and we have the fullest of full lineups today. My name is Laura Bradburn and I'm joined by Brian Degnan. How you doing, Brian?
I'm very well, thanks. It's been a while since we've been on. I think we've had 3 Prime Ministers and 14 Chancellors in that time. A lot's happened, so glad to be back to talk about football again.
Less said about that, the better, I think. Jim Orr, how you doing, Jim?
Good, Laura, thank you.
Good. And I believe we've been on a few shows together, Natasha, but I believe this might be the first Friday Bulletin together. So how you doing?
I know, it's exciting, isn't it? No, I'm very happy to be here. Delighted to join this stellar Friday lineup for a little guest appearance. Like Brian, I've missed a couple of my usual Tuesday slots, so I thought I would get myself on a Friday to join you wonderful people and talk about Celtic.
She's joined the youth team for the Friday. That's what it is, basically.
Is this Acsom bingo again? You're doing this Acsom bingo thing?
Just trying to complete my card, Jim, but you're already on it.
Right.
Plenty to discuss. We obviously had the Champions League game during the week. We've got the weekend to look ahead to, and we will do all of that today. Jim, I'll start with you. Shakhtar Donetsk on Tuesday, obviously a 1-1 draw. Plenty said about it already, but what was your thoughts on the game?
How long have we got? We've got 4 on today, haven't we?
We've got 59 minutes left. So
I think if the manager, if you win a game of football, the manager's picked the right team. You can't criticise that because that's the objective of the game. If you don't win a game, then you start to maybe question things, and team selection is one of those things you would sort of question. No Callum McGregor and no Jota. Champions League game, no passengers. You can't afford to have passengers in this kind of game. You need 8 out of 10 performances for everyone. I'd always play the best team. I'd always play the players in their best positions. And then when I saw the team, I thought, don't know about this team. Kyogo, I'd love to see Kyogo and Yakimakis playing together in a 4-4-2. But when you saw the team, you think, well, he's going to move Kyogo about. He's not going to move Yakimakis about. So where's he going to move him? Outside left, in the 10. And I just thought, anytime Kyogo's been moved, he's been really ineffective. And Tuesday night was no exception. I didn't watch the game back, didn't see the highlights, but from where I was sitting, I thought, I'm not sure what he's meant to be playing. He was kind of floating about. He was low in confidence before the game. He was picking things up here and everywhere. He was a passenger, I felt. I'm a huge fan of James Forrest, and I was astonished he wasn't playing. 4 goals in 2 games, European experience. Goes for Abada, and inside the box, Abada's brilliant, fantastic, and we'd never won the league last year if it wasn't for Abada's contribution. But he's been one of our poorest performers in Europe. I don't think he's got it at that kind of level. So we play Abada, he does nothing. That's passenger number 2. Juranovic, another poor performer in Europe. A lot of the goals have come down his side. I thought, having saw the goal again, I thought he could have done better with the goal. So I thought with 3 passengers, if you get 3 passengers in a Champions League game, I think you're going to struggle. And even having said that, we were the better team by miles and should have won the game. So disappointing. I think before the draw when we heard the draw, we thought we've got a chance against Shakhtar, a chance against RB Leipzig, and over the 2 games against Shakhtar, we're the better team by miles. Just couldn't put the ball in the net. But we'll learn from that. I mean, I think it's been, from a football point of view, it's been an enjoyable campaign. I've enjoyed watching us playing football. Disappointing in terms of what's happened, not scoring goals. We'll kind of learn from that. But I'm not a big fan of all this 60-minute talk. We can compete for 60 minutes. The game lasts 90 minutes. It's a couple of seasons ago, I think in the papers about a team where if every game lasted 80 minutes, they'd be top of the league. And we kind of mocked that at the time. Thought, don't be so daft. And we're saying the same thing. We're good after 60 minutes. And I think because of the levels that we're at, I think because also Ange has raised the expectations to really, really high level. And we're not at that level yet. And the big man knows we're not at that level yet. We don't have the players to be at that kind of level. Because, again, the function of every manager is to replace every single player with somebody who's better than them. We can't do it. Because of the financial constraints, we can't do that. So we depend on youth development and scouting and coaching and sports science and all that kind of stuff to try and get us better. And that's what Ange's trying to do. And it will take a bit of time. But I think the big chap will get there eventually. Disappointing, but I thought we played a lot of good football. I thought when we did lose goals in games, our heads kind of went down a wee bit and we kind of struggled. So that's something taking a look at. But overall, disappointing campaign results-wise, encouraging campaign football-wise. But we need to play our best team. We need to play the guys in the best positions, and we need to take our chances. So I don't think that's anything anyone else hasn't said.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Natasha. I'll come to you on it. As Jim says, we need to play the best players in the best positions. One criticism you might have of Ange is that he sticks to his system no matter who the personnel. And although he does try and fit the best players into that system, there are occasions like Tuesday night where he was kind of trying to, I feel, fit square pegs in round holes. Is that an unfair criticism, or do you think there's merit in that?
I think there is merit in it, because I think the players that we're talking to who perhaps moved out of their more natural position, if we want to call it that, can also play in the positions that he was trying to get them to play in. Like we saw on Tuesday, I don't think it was, a sort of square peg round hole situation, maybe the hole slightly more oval, because it almost worked. It wasn't that much of a disparity in terms of where they usually play, and I quite liked it, to be honest. We know he's a fan of a player that can play across a number of positions. I think Kyogo is a prime example of that. And he does have experience playing, maybe in that number 10 role, playing just off Giakoumakis, playing up front on his own, going out a bit wider. So I think he's a good player to have in your squad, and the fact that he can sort of utilise all these different positions. But for me, the way that Jim summed up the game on Tuesday kind of summarised the whole campaign for me. It was encouraging, yeah, but it was also frustrating. It was encouraging in the sense that I absolutely do see what Ange is trying to do here. We're going out and we're imposing our football, like you say, he's sticking to his principles. We're imposing our football on some top teams as well. Like Jim mentions, we are putting in good performances. And how I judge, a good performance, I suppose I'm judging that by the fact that I like the football we're playing. We're watching these games and I am actually enjoying the football we're playing. I think a lot of what we're doing is very good. They're entertaining games. So, it's encouraging in that sense. But as Jim touched on, there is also just this frustration, because there's this lingering feeling that I think we could have done a bit better. There were passengers in too many games. And for me, the stat which kind of summarised it is the fact that across the games we've played so far, we've had 68 shots on goal. And we only scored 3 times. We just weren't clinical enough. We didn't take some very, very good chances. And some of our key attacking players that Jim's already mentioned just did not shine on the big stage like we wanted them to. So every game we're coming away and we're saying we can take encouragement, we can take heart, we can take confidence, but ultimately we didn't take enough points. And, that's what frustrates me about it. But I don't want to be too negative, because going back to the encouragement part, we know what we're trying to do. And I do believe what Ange is saying is correct, in that you can't just come and compete at this level once every 5 years and expect to make an impact. You need to be there regularly, challenging at that level to progress. So players that Jim mentioned, like Abada, next time this comes round, will that be his time to shine? Will he be more used to playing at that level of opposition? But if Ange is talking like that and saying, yeah, we need the group to be competing regularly in Europe, we really, really need to work on the retention, because you're talking about these players being ready to go for the next campaign or having more experience to take to the next Champions League campaign. We need to make sure they're here first. So I think retention and keeping the group together is important for me on the back of this.
Yeah, just based on that conversation we're having about tactics and things, Ryan Kelly comes in and says maybe a more attacking 4-4-2 formation would help whenever we get the chance to pair Kyogo and Giakoumakis, as we've been talking about. The difference being the centre mids would be more of a holding role, with the wide men more attacking. That might fit our personnel quite well. It would depend on who exactly we're putting in those midfield positions. But Brian, we've gone through some of the aspects of the game on Tuesday that were frustrating. For me personally, it was the way both teams kind of seemed to continually want to give each other the ball. The possession from both teams was loose at best. But as both Jim and Natasha have said, there's been encouraging points from the campaign as a whole. You don't have to look too far across the city to see a team who really can't compete at this level. And I feel like even though we've come up short, we have shown some element of progress given how long it's been since we've been in the Champions League. Have you been encouraged by what you've seen over the first 5 matches, leaving aside obviously the fact we've got to go to the Bernabeu?
Aye, just an easy job in Madrid. The miracle in Madrid. No, I think that it's kind of been summed up, but what you're looking at is, or the way I've tried to look at it, because I'm a nightmare after the game, because I'm like, we should win that, they're all rubbish, for about 30 seconds, and I start to reflect on it, and then I'm like, actually, do you know what, if I'm looking at it objectively, I think we're probably where we're at, right? But I think if you look at it, if you look at Angie's first, say, 6 games at Celtic, it was almost the same story, right? You can see what we're trying to do, but we're not quite there. And it feels like this is his first Champions League campaign. We can see what he's trying to do, but we're not quite there. And I think that's a sort of a healthy way of looking at it. There is also contextual things we need to remember as well. Like, we did lose Jota, Callum McGregor, and Kyogo had a slump in form at absolutely the worst time. So any team's going to struggle with that with your star striker, your captain, and probably your best player aren't there or aren't on form. You're going to struggle anyway. And despite that, I think the reason there is disappointment is because of how well we played, how well we performed.
Yeah.
You know, if the Real Madrid game, for example, I've never been more encouraged after a loss, ever. I thought we were really, really good. The 2 Leipzig games, if you were a neutral, they're incredible games to watch. And I'll always take losing that way. What I hate is if you're sitting with 10 men behind the ball, hoping you don't get picked off, and then get picked off anyway. Or maybe have one header get in, and then sit back this game and try to hold on to it. I don't like that for the club. So I do like the sort of swashbuckling style. But with that is the results thing. And again, it's already saying kind of what ifs. You know, if we win in Shakhtar or we convert better chances, it's a different story. But I think disappointing in terms of the actual results, but really positive in terms of progress and performance, I think. It's interesting. We've touched on sort of passengers. I don't know if I would go as far as to say some of the players were passengers, but I think that there's a dynamic issue in the team at times. So when you play Abada and Maeda, I don't think it ever really works because they're not really wingers and they're not really strikers. They work if they've got a Jota and then they can come out the back post as a second striker. That works really well. Or Haksabanovic, or as somebody in the group called him, Action Manovic. Pretty good, Patel. Like one of the real sort of traditional winger, or even, as Jim says, like a James Forrest, that works better, the dynamic's better. And I think you can apply that logic to midfield as well, because although Riley played really well in the deeper role, there was no one to fill his role forward. I didn't understand why maybe McCarthy couldn't come in and just played the spoiler and because I think what you're losing in terms of his sort of passage of play, you're gaining in O'Reilly being further forward and covering for some of Hatate's errors. Because as good as Hatate is, he does excellent stuff in a game and really bad stuff all in the one game. But he's so good when he's good, you can't not have him, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's almost like Samaras. Like when Samaras was on form, he was absolutely unplayable. But then sometimes he could just be ridiculous and you never quite knew you were getting. Hatate's a bit like that, so you need someone like an O'Reilly next to him and a bit of security behind him. And I think when that dynamic shifts as well. And just finally, the only thing I would say is, in terms of the formation thing, I don't think that's really an issue. And the reason I don't is because if you pause the screen at any point during that game, every couple of minutes, there's no formation there. There's a rough defenders at the back, midfielders in the middle, strikers up front. That's pretty much it. I don't think it hugely affects his system, his tactics, how they line up, because they shift and drop and change anyway. Like a lot, I mean, Greg Taylor was in the right wing at points. Do you know what I mean? So it changes so often. I don't think it's a huge issue. If I'm honest, I don't think like a change of shape will particularly affect anything, because you still get one of the strikers dropping in anyway, and it works out kind of the same. So I think it's just getting we've got a key dependency issue, is how we describe it. We're very reliant on a certain group of players.
That sounds like work pattern, Brian, a key dependency issue.
It might be a bit, sorry about that. I've been working that much, actually. I've not been on the show. It's in my brain, so sorry about that.
I think just to clarify, using the word passenger as a non-contributor, they didn't contribute anything. So if they don't contribute, for me, that's a passenger. The other thing is we didn't get much luck Natasha rhymed off that stat there, 60 odd shots to goal. You need a wee bit of luck in these games. The Callum McGregor shot against Real Madrid, a couple inches to the side, that's a goal. The Hibs game the other week scored 6 goals. 2 of them were pretty lucky goals. And the Forest goal, Marshall spills. The Yakimakis goal hits a defender, hits the post and goes in. We never get that kind of luck in Europe. And
it doesn't bounce for us in Europe the same way, does it? The ball just doesn't bounce or drop the way that it does for us. It does in the league.
No, and I think that if we'd have went in front at any of those games, then it would have been different. If we'd been 1-up against Real Madrid with half an hour to go, or 1-up against Leipzig with half an hour to go, it's a completely different dynamic. But hey ho, it's over, and we move on.
I don't know if that's how the song goes, Jim. I think it's "Don't Dream It's Over," but we'll move on.
Crowded house, thank you.
And don't anybody let you tell you that
poptastic. Good.
Poptastic, exactly. Don't anybody tell you that Acsom don't deliver deep conversations on a Friday. Brian Degnan tactics don't exist. Wow, love it. That is a hot take.
That's the guy that said we beat Liverpool. Is that the same guy? Just to clarify,
did I say
it for a while? I'm just trying to understand.
How did I say? When did I say tactics don't exist? What I said was, I think there's a difference between tactics and systems.
Here's the new Friday game. Put words in Brian's mouth.
Yeah. I think it's called
this.
Is it been a comment section but live where they're just totally misinterpreting what I'm saying?
Don't just slag off the comment section. Everybody will leave. Jeez. Speaking of which,
Brian said that the earth was flat. Remember he said that? I vividly remember that.
Kaiser says afternoon legends, and Peter McGee likes Action Manovich. Brilliant, loves it. So I
don't know who that was, by the way. I'm claiming it as my own until I find out, and then I'll announce it. But I can't remember who said it.
Listen, the rules are the rules. If you get it onto the show first, it's yours. That's how it goes. But Champions League aside, we'll move on from that because unfortunately it doesn't look like we're going to get much further. Well, we're not going to get much further. And while a game at the Bernabeu is never a dead rubber, it's about as close to as it's going to get. But we'll enjoy it nonetheless. Moving on, if you look at the strapline, they're Celtic touted for the European Super League. Brian, I'll come back to you on this one first because we were having a bit of a discussion before the show. It's an interesting one. So basically, for anybody who doesn't know, there are suggestions in today's papers and in yesterday's papers that potentially Celtic and Rangers would be part of a newly proposed European Super League. Should the Premier League clubs not be involved as they were in the previous one? What are your thoughts on it, Brian? Would you like to see a European Super League? Would you like Celtic to be involved in one?
Not really, no, if I'm honest. I think, even if you got the money from it, the first couple of years, you'd be the whipping boys, you'd be accused of being kind of soulless, and there's always this sort of, I'm one of the Celtic romantics, where I love the club and what it means and why it exists, and I think joining the Super League maybe flies in the face of that a wee bit. The money would be great, but I'm not sure. I also don't think I think it's a sort of non-starter as a story, if I'm being honest. I think somebody's get excited and put it out there and hope people react to it. So I don't see it happening anyway. I didn't like it when it was announced for the Premier League teams and for the Spanish clubs and whatever. So I can't then decide, it's great because it's Celtic, because I don't think that's right. I don't think it's the way it should be. The money would be great, but no, it's no for me. I don't think it will happen, and I wouldn't really like it to happen, if I'm honest.
Natasha, it's not been so long since the football world was outraged morally at the idea of the Celtic Super League, the European Super League. Ironically enough, 5 of the 12 teams who were in that original proposal will be playing Europa League football at best after Christmas. What's your thoughts on something like this? There's obvious advantages to it for a club of Celtic's size, but it does leave a bit of a bad taste in the mouth, doesn't it?
Yeah, my thoughts on the Super League were what they were when it was originally announced, and they haven't changed since. It was never about having the best teams competing and getting everyone to watch the best football. It was simply about the richest clubs in the world getting richer at the detriment of all others, and regardless of the fans, that's what it was about. And Celtic being involved in that isn't really something that I'd like to see going forward. I mean, of course, there's ways that we can develop the club. There's maybe ways we can bring in more revenue, and there's things that we could look at in that regard. But we need to do so in a way that we don't lose the foundation and the identity of the club, the purpose for which it was set up, the background of the fans. We can develop the club and we can advance it, we can grow it, we can increase revenue, all of these things without losing what the club is. And I think the whole premise of a Super League, I think everything involved in it just goes so against all those things that I just mentioned that I don't see it being a good fit. But again, like Brian says, I can't see it happening. I think this is very much just paper talk, clickbait as we come to call it. They put up a story like that, plucking out a couple of clubs from thin air to pose the idea that we might be involved, only to gather more clicks on their own pages and to have the fans arguing amongst themselves in the comment section, which increases their own revenue. So, I mean, for me, that's all that article is. I think it's a bit of a non-starter, and I can't see it being particularly welcomed.
Yeah, Jim, certainly for as long as I can remember, these conversations come up every few years, whether it's Celtic and Rangers joining the Premier League, whether it's some sort of breakaway league for the lower tiered European leagues like the Scottish League, the Dutch League, the Portuguese League, stuff like that. Do you see anything like this ever happening in future and actually coming into fruition, or is it, as Brian and Natasha say, just kind of paper talk that just sells a few papers every now and again?
I'll go against those two young'uns there because I'm older and I've seen all this stuff happening before. This will happen. It's a matter of timing as to when it will happen. Back in the 80s, people said TV will just ruin football, and it has. Money will ruin football, and it has. That's what happens, basically. And this will just be the next stage of that. Look at the Champions League. I hate the Champions League. I hate everything the Champions League stands for. The Europa League, the Conference League. It's all nonsense. If you're going to have a European league, have a proper European league with teams going up and down. So you have an 8-team league, 8-team top division, second division, third division, blah, blah, blah. All the big guys are on the top. We start off with because it's based on coefficient. Teams go up the leagues, teams go down the leagues. That's how you do that. Champions League, where teams who are not the champions. Don't be daft. Champions League, where if you're third, you go down to a different competition. Absurd. Europa League, if you're third, you go to a different. Absolutely absurd. All driven by money. The Super League will happen, whether it's called the Super League or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. And it's an interesting conversation with Celtic fans because I get where Brian's coming from. I get where Natasha's coming from. The soul of the club, the spirit of the club. If we've got a chance to go into this big league with the big boys, we'll take it in a heartbeat. Absolutely take it in a heartbeat. Whether you like it or not, don't know. Because I, as a Celtic fan, and I've said this in the podcast a number of times, would you be comfortable in the current climate of a Celtic player being paid £100,000 a week? No, you wouldn't. So what's your number that you're happy with? Right. And if you only pay them that, you're not going to get the best players then. And if you look at the best players, you're going to have Champions League campaigns like this. So money will always win. It will always win. It's a matter of timing. And back in the 80s, you never saw football on TV. And we've got the World Cup coming up next month. And I can't be bothered with it, to be perfectly honest. But when I was younger, the 70s and the 80s, we'd never seen Pelé play. We'd never seen Johan Cruyff play. We'd never seen Maradona play. But the World Cup was coming up and we were excited. I've seen Messi play. I've seen Ronaldo. I can watch them every single week of the year. So the World Cup, am I not bothered? No, really. Because the Champions League came along with all its money and the Super League will be next. It's a matter of timing. And when something like that does come along, you've got a decision to make, Celtic. Do you want to be part of that and have some success, or do you want to be an also-ran? And I think it's a dead interesting debate as to what's going to happen next, because I certainly agree with Brian and Natasha. The Celtic history says that we should be doing X, Y, and Z, but when push comes to shove, we want to be right up the middle of that. We want to be part of that. We're asked to that. We're in a heartbeat. And then you've got the dilemma of, we're going to start paying players £100,000 a week. And how does that sit with you? Are you still going to go to the games? Of course you're still going to go to the games. Home and away like Natasha? Absolutely. You won't like it because I don't like the Champions League, but I'll go to the games. I hope we do well, but I just don't like that format at all. And I'd rather have, as I said, a European league where you get a chance of going up the leagues and get down the leagues, because that's a kind of fairer meritocracy. I mean, the fact that Spurs are in the Champions League and Arsenal are in the Champions League and stuff like that, it's a nonsense. But that's money driving it. And whether you want to call it the Super League or not, that's next. That'll be next.
Mm.
Rant over. Sorry, team. Rant over. That's it.
That was a brilliant. That was excellent.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I feel like there
top
needs to be
10 one.
a round of applause for that one or something. I'd enjoyed that one. But like you say, the concerns will be less about the £100,000 a week Celtic player and more about what rooftop bar Natasha's sending as a picture of her cocktail from.
Yes.
But it could
Yeah, I
be
mean, if the European Super League has any, redeeming factor, it is the possibility of even more holidays that are currently going according to this group. So
It's just all you,
Natasha.
Natasha. That's what it is.
European correspondent. Just have you all over the place. Just give you a mic, the Acsom on it, we'll send you all over.
sounds good to me. I'll pitch that to Paul John.
Bruh, what a gig that would be, by the way. But anyway, we will move on. The next
And
topic.
also what they'll then do is they'll extend it to South America. You get Boca Juniors coming in and whatever, because that's where the money's going. Right,
Will
rant is over. Right,
will your
I'm
air
sitting
miles
back
get
here.
you to Buenos Aires, Natasha, do you think?
They might do.
In a
They might
heartbeat,
do.
in a
Works for
heartbeat.
me.
Yeah, well, certainly.
I don't know if Ryanair fly that far, but we'll see. Next item on the agenda is Jenz looking like a permanent signing. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around this. Natasha, I'll come to you first on this one. Carl Starfelt's obviously been blighted by injury this season. There are his supporters, there are his detractors. I think nobody questions Cameron Carter-Vickers' place in the team. It's hard to establish exactly what kind of an impact Jenz has had and whether his impact during the loan spell has been one that you would say definitely merits his taking up that option to buy him. Is he somebody you'd like to see us bring in permanently either in January or at the end of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been happy with most of what I've seen from him so far. I think he's been a great addition. I think he's good on the ball. I think he's pretty good for the system that Ange likes to play. So for all those perspectives, it's a bit of a no-brainer. It's not particularly easy to find a good centre half within our price range, and it's not, particularly easy to know if they're going to come in and get on well with the squad and fit in and, play the system and work well with the team around them. Jenz has already done that, so, we've got him in the door. He's playing well with Carter-Vickers. He's playing well with the team. He looks to be, relatively comfortable in our system. So, from that perspective, it's a no-brainer to sign him if the money's right, of course. Is he perfect? No, he's not. There are things that let him down from times. We have seen him, make the odd mistake. We've seen him being out of position. We've seen him being beaten in the air. So no, he's not the perfect signing. He's not the perfect centre half, sorry, but he's pretty good. I think he's pretty good. You're not going to get the perfect centre half for the money we're able to afford. We're not in the European Super League yet. We've not got 100 million to spend on a replacement. So for the money that I believe's been discussed for him, then yeah, I think it's a pretty much a no-brainer. I think the player seems pretty happy here. I think that his intention would be to stay. So I think for me, I would definitely be surprised if he didn't. And, we need him in terms of numbers as well. We've got Carter-Vickers, obviously. We've got Starfelt coming back. And then apart from that, it's Stephen Welsh, who, I think, again, hasn't done anything particularly wrong. Looks good when he comes in domestically. I think he's fine. But that can't be the only three. So if we were to let Jenz go, we'd then be looking to bring someone else in. So it's a no-brainer to keep Jenz. I think that'll happen. I don't know if we'll see it in January or at the end of the season, but I think I'm pretty confident that he'll be kept.
Yeah, I would go along with that, I think. Jim, there's a lot of discussion around, trying to improve the quality of player that we've got, trying to make sure that the step down from first choice to squad player isn't too great. Does Jenz fit the bill for you as far as that's concerned, or are you looking for something of a higher quality than what he's shown so far?
No, I'd agree with everything Natasha just said there. I think he's been tested in Europe and he's been absolutely fine. I like Carl Starfelt, but people say there's always a mistake in the big chat. But Jenz hasn't made many mistakes. I was trying, when you were just chatting to him, Natasha, I'm trying to think, when has Jenz made a big mistake? I can't think of any. So and he's also played well in Europe, notwithstanding this Wednesday night. But we'll maybe see if he gets on then. But he's not looked out of place in Europe, and that's a bit of a test. Because one thing, looking good against St Johnstone at Celtic Park, but to go over to Leipzig and I thought he did okay that night, and I think he's been fine in Europe, and he looks okay. And as Natasha said, for the amount of money that we're going to pay, whatever that's going to be, it won't be excessive, I would imagine. He looks a reasonable buy. So yeah, if we can get him, off we go. Yeah.
Brian, it's an interesting one. One conversation point that I saw regarding the defenders that we've got. Obviously, Cameron Carter-Vickers appears a bit of an all-round player, and I think the conflict people are having between whether they prefer him partnered with Jenz or with Starfelt is the different sort of abilities that they have. I think most people would agree that Jenz is slightly better with the ball at his feet, while Starfelt, when he gets his positioning right, is probably better in the air than Jenz. Which is your preferred out of those two, assuming Cameron Carter-Vickers takes the other spot?
So Jenz is I think the preferred partner just because he's more comfortable playing in the left side. I think Starfelt, actually, we've not seen him really play on the right side. He always looks a wee bit ungainly with the ball at his feet, but he is a lot of time he's on his other side. So that could be a factor as well. So it's maybe worth thinking about if he's, cover for Starfelt and we need another partner for him or Welsh. So I think even if we keep Jenz, we still need another sort of well-balanced, probably left-footed centre-back. Especially if you look at how much we play for the back and how reliant on that is to get these key passes and receive them. Because some days when you receive them on the other foot, it gets awkward for turning and it can lead to mistakes. So I think whether it's Jenz staying or not, I think even if he stays, we still need another centre-back for balance. And that leaves us with a 5, which is probably covers well for injuries and the dynamics a bit better, a bit more balanced. But yeah, I agree with everything that Jim and Natasha have said. He's looked really good, strong, plays well with ball at his feet. Looks like he handles pressure quite well. He's quite composed for quite a young guy. And as long as the money's no ridiculous, I mean, I don't know what the figure's been quoted as. If it's like 3 million, then you go, well, yeah, that's pretty good. If it's 6 million, you think you bought somebody better. So it just depends on the figures. But I believe it's a fairly reasonable transfer fee. So I keep him, but we definitely need more backup still, I believe.
Yeah.
Laura, it's worth pointing out the fact that we haven't had many goals from either Carter-Vickers or Jenz. I mean, Jenz got off to a flyer start, a couple of goals in the first couple of games. We need more goals from those positions. Again, in Europe, we maybe have to look towards them to maybe contribute a goal or two. Didn't happen. So if you score more goals, also I was just thinking when the guys were talking that Ange wants a certain type of player. Good though Carter-Vickers is, I'm not sure he's an Ange type player in terms of bringing the ball forward and put the ball at his feet. I think Jenz is a bit better in terms of being an Ange style player. So it's whether Ange is aware of maybe 2 or 3 more Ange type players and bringing them. And that's the thing I said earlier, that you're always looking to replace every single player with somebody better because that will make your team better. So it could be that, I'm pretty sure Ange will be scouring the market. If he sees maybe 2 or 3 players that he thinks I could bring these guys in and get rid of Jenz and Carter-Vickers, although that sounds bizarre, that I wouldn't put it past him to do something like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. And listen, I this is where I couldn't be a journalist or anything like it because I lose all objectivity. I just like Jenz because I had the privilege of speaking to him at the press conference when he signed, and he's got a very winning smile and he shook my hand at the end, so I can't complain. As basic
so it's all down to winning smiles,
then,
Laura. Is that that shallow? It's all down to winning smiles, right? Just so we know, Brian.
Listen,
Natasha, big smile from Laura.
If there's one word to describe me, Jim, it's shallow. I will take it. William Beattie says Virgil wasn't the greatest when he joined as Jenz in the same mould. I'll tell you something, if Jenz turns out half the player that Virgil van Dijk did, then I think both he and us will be happy. And Uncle Nobby's Steamboat, interesting name, says Acsom Airlines is a possible idea. Listen, never rule anything out in the business world when it comes to Paul John Dykes. He gets finger in many pies, and it wouldn't surprise me if Airlines was next on the list.
Over to Natasha with that one, yeah, good.
We will look ahead for the last portion of the show to next or this weekend's game, I should say. We've got Livingston away from home on Sunday. Jim, I'll come to you first. We've had a bit of a mixed bag of results recently. Obviously, struggled to some extent to overcome Hearts with a 4-3 victory. We had the loss to St Mirren not too long ago, but sprinkled in with that, there's the 4-0 win against Motherwell in the Scottish League Cup, and there's the 6-1 drubbing of Hibs in the Premiership as well. Livingston are a bit of a banana skin for us, Jim. Do you see them posing as a problem, given that we have been a little bit all over the place in terms of form recently?
I think the team's got their mojo back. I mean, the Hearts game, 2 penalty kicks, so you take them away. It's not as if we scored 4 goals at Motherwell, 6 against Hibs. So I think we're back. Livingston, yeah, they've been a bogey team in the past, but I think now we've got a definitive style of playing football. I think nobody's a bogey team anymore. I think they've consistently punched above their weight. Just looked at the table there, they're 6th at the moment. They're sitting above Hearts. We've got quite a small team. I'd imagine set pieces is their kind of main forte, throwing balls into the box. Maybe for that reason, maybe something like Abelgard might maybe come in for a game. Maybe Tony Ralston comes in for a game. I think we'll win okay. I think because of this, how we play. I think in the past we went to Livingston and we've been a bit disjointed and maybe not sure what we're doing, but we know exactly what we're doing. And we'll create loads of chances and we'll have at least 20 shots at goal. And I think we'll take a few of those chances and I think we'll do okay. On Sunday, is it? Sunday, yeah. And as long as he plays wingers, James Forrest must come back and I play Haksabanovic on the left and the big Yakimakis up front. I always think if you're playing a target man, you play 2 genuine wingers because they'll keep the defenders occupied. They'll have to be doubled up on. And when you've got guys like Hatate and O'Reilly, and if you give them lots of space, then they'll then punish it. I think when we don't play wingers, it makes it easier for teams like Livingston to defend. So we need to play wingers, we need to get to the byline, we need to have cutbacks, we need to do all that kind of stuff. I'm sure Anjo knows all that stuff better than me. So I think, again, we play the right team, we play people in the right positions, then I don't have any issues with Sunday. But mind you, they got a good result last week, which obviously has helped us. Because I think last time I was on, I was saying that it'd be really good to get into that kind of like World Cup break with a kind of 4-point cushion, and Livingston helped that to happen last week. So, yeah, they're having a good season. They always do well. They always punch above their weight. But the players we've got and the squad that we've got, I mean, if we don't take 3 points on Sunday, no excuses.
Yeah, Brian, I think what Jim says there about having a more defined way of playing and a strong squad from that point of view means that our history with Livingston of it being a potential banana skin for us at every turn is maybe a thing of the past. Are you confident that we can go through to Livingston and get something from the game quite comfortably?
Yeah, well, comfortably maybe not as much. I think, again, like Jim said, it depends who starts. Obviously, I have no interest in tactics, so it doesn't really matter to me who plays where. But I think he's right about the wingers in Yakimakis, because it's interesting with Kyogo. He probably plays better when Abad is there because he moves so much. Abad can come in, whereas if Yakimakis was pretty much in about the box, you want your 2 wingers. So I agree with him. I'd like to see Forrest start actually in Haksabanovic. Forrest a bit of form, and I'd like to see Abelgard. I hope I'm pronouncing that name properly. Coming in, because I think O'Reilly's much better forward. As good as he's been. I would never criticise Matt O'Reilly anyway because he's lovely, but he's
a winning smell apparently.
He does it on shallow as well because Champions League disappointment, big match smiles. I'm like, all right, carry on. But he's better further forward, and I think if he maybe Turnbull in there as well. The only slight concern, and you touched on it, Jim, in terms of players' favourite position. And I'd mentioned this to Laura before we come on. If you've got to say Abelgard or McCarthy, O'Reilly and Turnbull, or Moy and Turnbull, that's not the most athletic midfield. They don't cover a lot of ground. Technically, very, very good, but they don't cover a lot. But I wonder if against a team like Livingston, when you've got so much of the ball anyway, that might not be a factor. So it'd be interesting to see if there is any changes there. And I'd have Ralston back in as well. I don't think he's done anything to deserve getting dropped. I think it always gives you plenty. And he likes the physicality of these games as well. He's always good to have something like him in the squad. And Taylor's undroppable, isn't he? He's became an absolute first name in the team sheet this season.
I am a total Greg Taylor convert, I have to say. He's been
fantastic. 100%. I thought he's been at the start of the season. I remember saying stuff, so I think we need an upgrade. But I think he's he's a great example. Whether it's because he sees Bernabeit training and thinks I need to step up or not, but just like give him a wee shout out because he's been excellent. I think he's almost undroppable at this stage.
For anybody watching, if you get Brian in a Secret Santa at work or whatever, a new pair of Matt O'Reilly pyjamas to replace his current ones would be a good shout, I would say.
Just a nice wee picture.
Why is that?
Oh, I just find it a little bit of a giggle to imagine Brian cuddling up in bed with his wee Celtic teddy in his Matt O'Reilly pyjamas.
But it's the fact you said replacement I was more interested in that. Because I knew all about the fanaticism.
That's a different podcast. That's a different story.
I'm just asking the questions today, Laura. So
Natasha,
have to be asked.
We're getting to the meat of it all, that's for sure. Oh, that's maybe not right.
Yeah, let's hope no, Laura.
Bye. That's me away. Bye.
Cheers, everybody.
We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Good knowing you. Bye.
Natasha, Livingston, obviously, as I've said to both Jim and Brian, are a kind of potential banana skin, whatever way you want to put it. Some of the suggestions Brian made there in terms of selection, are you in line with what he said there? What kind of lineup would you be looking for from the Celtic team for this weekend?
Absolutely. I was having to think about it before I came on, about what changes I might expect to see in Jim, and Brian have pretty much covered them off. The key ones for me would have been bringing Ralston in at right back and replacing Juranovic. Again, just because similar to what the guys have touched on, I think it's a game that he is more suited to. I think we could do with him for this one. Again, having Forrest out wide and Giacomakis up front makes perfect sense to me. So we'd be going along with that as well. It's difficult though. It's very hard to predict with Ange what he does. Sometimes we expect him to make few changes and he'll make 6 or 7. Sometimes we expect him to make a lot of changes and he doesn't really make any. And I think the other factor we've got to remember here is that yes, we are playing again next week in Madrid, but that game is effectively a dead rubber. That game, as much as we want to go out there and be competitive, that is no longer an important game in terms of the whole prospect of our season. The important game is, this one against Livingston on the Sunday. So that's likely to, where we're going to see our strongest team. Will that see a lot of rotation? I'm not sure. Will the Madrid game see a lot of rotation? I think that might be a very different story. But Ange doesn't believe in having a strongest team or a strongest 11. He believes in having the best team to win any particular game of football. And I think the best team to win this particular game on football is, like the guys have touched on, is, making the changes like Giacomakis up front, having Forrest. And yeah, I'd like to see Haksabanovic come in there as well. So, from that perspective, I do expect to see the changes that they've suggested in terms of the game as a whole. Yeah, it's not a great place to go. Simply, at the base of it, the pitch doesn't make it a great place for us to go. It doesn't really lend itself to us playing the kind of football that we like to play. So that's an obstacle that you have to overcome almost immediately, regardless of who's on the pitch. The pitch itself is the obstacle here. Livingston, yes, have been a bit of a difficult team for us over the years, but I think Ange kind of fixed that jinx last season, I say, touching wood. So I don't feel as nervous as I used to feel going to the Tony Macaroni. I do feel a little bit more confident in terms of the fact that Ange does know how to break down teams like this now. He does know how to get the best out of us when we can't play our brand of football as well on a pitch like that. So yeah, it's always going to be difficult playing off the back of a difficult Champions League game. But the benefit we have this time is there's not another big Champions League game coming up next week. There is a Champions League game coming up next week, but it isn't of the magnitude that perhaps some of the others have been given the situation that we find ourselves in now.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Yeah.
See if you took one of the lines out of context that Natasha just said there. I don't feel as nervous going to the Tony Macaroni anymore. Context, you think somebody just said that? Do you think what are you on about?
Listen, I don't feel as nervous going to the Tony Macaroni Stadium as I do eating at Tony Macaroni's, but the less said about that, the better.
Some random person in the street said that to you. Think, what are you on about?
Tony Macaroni, if any of the Lego team are watching, we don't mean it, we're only kidding.
Yeah, Yes, exactly. That is a one-off experience that I'm sure does not apply to the customer base at large. Sorry. We've got that covered. Listen, remains to be seen what happens with Livingston, but what's one thing for sure is we'll be there watching it with Acsom, and we will be doing match coverage as always. If you want to see that, if you want to see lots more content from the channel, then please make sure you like and subscribe to this video if you haven't done already. We really appreciate it, and it really helps us get out to more and more people, which is always, of course, the aim. We're going to do a little bit to close the show on the run into the World Cup shutdown and how we think that's going to go. But before we do that, Natasha, as our resident women's team expert for Celtic, thought it only right to come to you for what is a massive clash at the top of the Women's Premier League table this weekend. Celtic are obviously playing away at Glasgow City. They are tied at the top of the league on 24 points. Glasgow City, Celtic and Rangers, the top three. A massive game for the team, for Fran Alonso and the team going into this weekend.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. We always knew at the start of the season that the challenge was going to be the other two of the top three, if you like. We knew that there was a top three being Celtic, Rangers and Glasgow City, and the other teams, all respect to them, are a step down from that. And it's played out exactly as we've expected it so far, that all of the top three teams have won all of their games, and Celtic are yet to even concede a goal in the league so far. So it has gone as we've expected it to go, which makes the games against Glasgow City and Rangers really important, because those ones against each other are going to determine where the league goes this season. So this is the first time that any of the top three have come up against each other. So we're going to be away at Glasgow City, and it's going to be a really tough game. It's very easy to say that the girls are going relatively well in the league. They're playing good. They're scoring lots of goals. The goal difference is looking very, very healthy. But now it's time to actually be tested, and the test is going to come from Glasgow City, and that's going to give us a really good indication of where the team is at in terms of competing for the league this season. So it's going to be an important game. It's going to be a really difficult one. It's at Petershill Park, for anyone who's interested in going along to watch. It's on after the Livingston game, so there's no clash. You can probably, if you'll be in Livingston like me, probably manage to make it in time after the game. And, it's great to get along and support the girls in this one as well. They did have a pretty disappointing result last weekend. We're playing in the Cup against Spartans. They lost the first goal across the competitions, and the 92nd minute, having played with 10 players since the 30-minute mark roughly. Gutter to lose the goal in the 92nd minute, and then went to lose the game on penalties and exit the Cup. It's been a massive disappointment to Fran and the girls. Obviously we won that Cup last season. There was the pressure of retaining it, and to go out at that quarter-final stage was really, really disappointing. So expect to see, a bounce back from them this weekend. They'll be looking to put that upset behind them, and no better way to do it than go down and, leaving a marker on Glasgow City. So it's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a good one. We would encourage people to get along and watch. And if not, it will be on BBC Alba, I believe, 4:10 kickoff. So look out for that one.
Okay, that was Chris Fraser's question. Is it on Celtic TV? But as Natasha says, it's on BBC Alba, which you can watch. For anybody who was wondering what the goal difference is for a team 8 games into the season who hasn't conceded, is a goal difference of plus 43, which I think is rather impressive. That's quite good. But I'll definitely be looking out for that result and hoping to see a Celtic victory, as we all will. And hopefully they can go on and win the league from there. But certainly they're in a strong position. I think them, Rangers and Glasgow City, are all on 24 points, and then 4th place Hearts are on 12. So the league's only going one of 3 ways, as you said, this season. Let's hope it comes back to Celtic.
It's come down to the fact that we've only got 3 full-time professional teams at the moment. Hibs and Hearts have started to make inroads into that, bringing them under the umbrella of their men's teams, and started some of the players, going professional, not all of them yet. But we only do have the 3 teams as full-time professional. So there is a gap at the moment. The gap is, hopefully going to be bridged by teams like Hibs and Hearts starting to invest more in their women's squad. But we are still in the infancy of the women's game in Scotland. It's still going through a bit of transition. So these goals differences and these scores are going to happen when you've got one team who are professional and one team who are part-time. Not even part-time, you know. So it is going to happen at the moment. But look forward to the game on Sunday. And the more we get along and support the women's team and the women's game, the more it can grow.
Absolutely. If you're looking for a chance to go and you can't make it to the Livingston game, then maybe take the family to the women's game, and you'll have a great day out, hopefully, as well. Brian, I'll come to you first. We're going back to the men's team for the next few weeks. We've only got 3 matches after the Real Madrid game. We've got Dundee United at home, Motherwell away, and Ross County at home before the shutdown for the World Cup. Jim talked earlier about potentially going into that World Cup shutdown with a 4-point cushion. Obviously, that's what we want out of it. Do you see, given that those matches are quite compact together, and the run of games that we've had so far, do you see us having any problem going into the World Cup break with that 4-point cushion, or is that what you're expecting from us?
It's probably what I expect, without being disrespectful to other teams. I think we should have the squad to cope. I know obviously we lost against St Mirren, but I think that was a sort of key learning thing. And I think it was the exception rather than the rule. I think we've been good form otherwise. So I do expect that. I think it's key, really. You saw last season when we made a really, really big fixture pile up in about December time, how well the team responded despite being threadbare. So I think there is a real good character in the squad that sort of enjoys that challenge and stuff. And I think they've got to be hurting about, although there's no shame in, not beating every team in the Champions League. They'll be smart about it. They'll be thinking they could have done better inside, and I think they'll show that domestically. They'll still feel the pain of St Mirren, no doubt as well, how that felt. So I think they'll know that although the Rangers maybe aren't having the greatest time just now, they need every point is essential, because if you go into that sort of international break, Callum McGregor will be obviously going to Scotland. Well, Scotland will be there anyway, but hopefully no huge amount of players going to be for international duty, so you can get a time in the training ground, get people back to full fitness, get everybody prepared, and then you start the sort of season part 2, 4 points ahead. And I think we play Rangers in the 2nd January. It's all set up for us to take real good advantage of it, so I hope we do, and I think we will.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Jim, the run in, I think we've coped as well as we can, given that there was that run of, I think, 13 games from the start of October to the World Cup shutdown over that 6-week period. We've come out of it relatively unscathed, bar a couple of out of the ordinary results. Do you see us, getting this last stretch through to the World Cup break without any more hiccups?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think said at the start of the season, out with the Glasgow derbies, we'd likely afford to drop, maybe lose a couple of games, maybe draw, maybe 4 games, something like that. But those are at certain places. I don't expect to drop points at home against anyone. I'd be dead surprised if that happened. We're going to Motherwell again, having beaten them 4-0 the other week, so I think we'll take care of them okay. I think if we drop points at places like Tynecastle, Easter Road, Pittodrie, you think, hey ho, that's fair enough. We're going to drop points somewhere. But I don't think we should be dropping points at home against anyone, to be perfectly honest. And Motherwell, having just beaten them the other week, that should be okay. And if we go with that minimum 4 points gap, that gives a wee bit of a cushion going to Ibrox. I mean, obviously there's some more games to be played before we go to Ibrox, but if we get to Ibrox 4 points ahead, I'll be perfectly happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Natasha, it's an interesting thing to think about with Brian saying we've got the game against Rangers relatively early after we come back from the World Cup shutdown. It remains to be seen exactly how many of our players will be going to the World Cup to represent their countries, but aside from a few, the majority of the squad will be going to Australia for that Sydney Cup fixture, or Sydney Cup tournament, I should say. Do you see any difficulty with, such a massive break in the season, keeping up match sharpness, keeping up match fitness, keeping momentum going that hopefully we will carry into that break, and making sure that continues throughout the rest of the season for us?
There is always a risk with that. Nobody wants the season to pause while everything's going well. We want to just keep getting on with it and playing our football and keep the momentum going. But the thing is it's going to affect all the teams in the same way. Of course, not everyone's going to have players going to the World Cup where there's going to be discrepancy in how many are going over. But everyone's going to have to stop. Competitive football for all clubs is going to have to stop anyway. The teams are going to be facing that problem all in the same way. The Australia Cup or the Sydney Cup for us is a good thing in terms of that it keeps the squad together, it keeps them playing football, it keeps their training programme all the same. And anyone who is away at the World Cup, I'm sure there'll be plans in place for them to pick up some individual training programmes depending on when their team exits the World Cup and when they can join up with the squad. So I'm sure all that planning is underway to keep the fitness levels up. And otherwise, there's just nothing we can do about it. And all the clubs are going to be facing the same problem. We're all going to come back into that first game after the World Cup, having not played since the last game week before it. And you've got to do what you can in terms of keeping the friendly games competitive, keeping the players match fit, and hoping that all your players come back from the World Cup uninjured. And it is what it is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see anyway. Like you say, it's a kind of anomaly in terms of, can't remember the last time, if ever, there's been a shutdown like this in all the major leagues right in the middle of the season. So I'm sure it's going to
Why is that, Laura?
unusual result.
Why is that?
Why is what?
Why is this happening?
Oh, the same reason everything happens, as you said earlier, Jim. Money.
Thank you. There we go. Right. It's spoiled this season already. Right.
That is the be all and end all. And the worst thing about me being shallow, Jim, is I'll be watching every minute of it anyway.
I'll be watching.
Not only the money aspect, actually where it's been played as well. Football sold its soul again, and they'll just continue to keep selling its soul. Right, so I rant over again.
No, listen,
right.
I think it's
But I'm no longer
point.
afraid going to Tony Macaroni, I'll tell you that. Like,
No, listen,
all the money in the world, I'm not afraid. I don't care.
Listen, I think it's a fair point to make. I don't think anybody sitting here has any justification for some of the things that are going on over in Qatar at the moment, and it's a choice of whether you think that taking in that tournament justifies any of that, which obviously it doesn't. But I don't know. There's a long way to go before we solve any of those problems, and it's certainly not going to happen on this podcast today.
But tune in next week anyway.
Natasha's given up already. I don't know where she's off to.
She's booked her flights. She's off.
Aye, she's away. For the Super League. Aye.
I was going to say.
I
I
was going to say either that or somebody for Tony Macaroni's hacked the feed. Absolutely, some raging assistant managers just lost his mind.
Just another ASOS delivery. If any of my family are listening, it's not for me.
Listen, it's not for us to say, but I'm just genuinely worried for your safety there. Like you say, I think Tony Macaroni's got some head honchos on their way over to your house right now. But thanks very much, everybody, for joining us. If you are going to Australia for the Sydney Cup, if you are going to Qatar for the World Cup, if you're doing one stop, going to the next one, then let us know in the comments. We would love to know about that. Brian, Jim and Natasha, thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you all this weekend for the Livingston watch along.
Cheers, Laura.
Thanks.